Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today we are doing an oil change on a 2005 Mini Cooper S, which is a supercharged motor. The car was just driven maybe 15 miles, maybe a little bit more. So the motor is warmed up. And we're gonna start with the passenger side. This is how you open your hood. And then right here under the headlight, right where my hand is, that yellow tab, is how you lift up the hood. Safety is always a priority, so what I usually do is lift up the vehicle and then place a jack underneath the frame and then lower the jack, so most of the weight goes onto the jack stand, but then still keep the jack underneath. I got the vehicle lifted on both sides just because it's a Mini. It's a little bit harder to get to everything. So we are in front of the vehicle. We are about to dip under. We have to remove this plastic piece. There's two Phillips head screws on both sides. Here's what that looks like. And there's actually two screws right here and right there. Mine were loose. So we'll set that aside. And this exposes the drain bolt, which is right here.
A few minutes later,
oil has been drained, everything put back in place. Forgot to mention that you'll need a 13mm socket and then a Phillips flathead if you have that plastic piece. Now we're going behind the motor. So here's our oil filter housing. Let's see if there will be light. Yeah, you guys can kind of see that without a flashlight. So it's basically behind or between the firewall and the engine. Now to get the filter housing off, you will need a special socket. This is a 36mm. Ideally, you would use a 36mm socket to remove it. I have a 36mm socket, but it's too big and it doesn't clear, basically going on, and then there's a plastic piece which it hits. So even if I were to get the socket on, I wouldn't be able to get the wrench on. So what I used was one of these super cheap oil filter removal things. So basically you slide it on, and then once you turn it, it tightens it and releases the oil filter. But even that's very difficult. By hand, it's nearly impossible. I feel like this car was slightly neglected by the previous owner. So I don't know when the last oil change was done, but I did get it loose just enough to where I could start turning it by hand. That's what I'm gonna do now. So this is a very uncomfortable placement for the darn oil filter. And if you don't have the proper tools, it could potentially hurt. So this is a warning to you guys for the next clip. If you're somewhat sensitive to painful spots, then don't look. This is what it took to get that darn filter housing off. I already feel the stinging, the burning, but I know once it starts to heal up, this hand is going to be very uncomfortable to use. So I guess be very careful, very mindful when you're trying to unscrew it, because let me pull it out, I'll show you guys. Here's the housing with the filter in it, and this is what I busted my hand on right here by trying to twist it. This is the oil filter I'm using. It is good for up to 10,000 miles, and it comes with an O-ring gasket right here, which sits at the bottom. So I'm gonna replace that real quick, and then we could start putting this back in. O-ring has been replaced. I'm gonna clean up the housing, and then I'm gonna put some of this oil around the O-ring just so that it seals a little bit better. So hopefully next person doesn't have to struggle as much as I did. And then we could start pouring oil in, and I'm using full synthetic Kirkland brand 5W30. Filter and filter housing have been put in. They have been tightened, and you'll feel it with your fingers. Basically tighten it, and then underneath, if you feel a gap between the block, the motor, and the filter housing, continue tightening it. And so as soon as I tightened it, it was just dead. You can't really tighten it more than it needs to be tightened. Thread runs out, that's it, you're done. Starting to lose daytime, guys, but we are about to pour 4 quarts of this oil in. I'll probably do a little bit And as always, once I'm done, I start the car, I let it run for about 30 seconds, I check underneath, I check around the areas where I worked, so it's going to be the oil filter housing on the side of the engine right there. Make sure there's no obvious leaks, no funny noises, and then I let the car sit for about 10 minutes, and then we measure with the dipstick if I need to add a little bit more. I do. If I don't, then we're golden. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. I really appreciate you guys watching it. Make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you drop a comment in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in another video.